Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. Joining me in the studio tonight via Skype, we have Effie Samara, a writer, who's joining us. I think it's the second time, Effie, that I've had you as a guest on the show. Welcome back.
No, it's been more than that, about 4 or 5 times sure already. So.
My memory's terrible, Effie. Anyway, and of course, our regular contributor, Chris McCusker from the SNP's Socialist Group. Welcome back, Chris.
Good evening, Gordon. Good evening, Effie.
Okay, as usual, I'm going to jump straight into the coronavirus update. And as of 2 o'clock today in Scotland, there has been a total of 115,259 coronavirus tests concluded. And of these, 99,841 tests were confirmed negative. 15,418 tests were positive. There were 735 people in hospital last night, 20 of whom were in intensive care, with another 7 with suspected COVID-19 also in intensive care. This marks an increase of 18 confirmed new cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection has sadly risen to 2,363. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 39,045 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 111. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Now to our first story of the evening. Cities across the United States saw further unrest on Sunday as protests against police brutality and the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis raged on. Fires burned in the nation's capital, including near the White House, on the 6th day of nationwide demonstrations. Amid rising anger and frustration at the repeated failure of America's policing system to address the staggering number of deaths of unarmed African Americans at the hand of officers, mayors of more than a dozen cities imposed curfews and governors of 6 states called in the National Guard. But the move did not deter protesters from gathering again in many cities as Sunday night drew in. Since Floyd's death last week, more than 4,100 protesters have been arrested. In Minneapolis, where the protest began last week after video emerged of a police officer kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes, National Guard troops were deployed as demonstrations continued. All the main highways were closed and many side streets closed off by makeshift barriers. People around defied orders to stay home at night. The main gathering place remained the street where George Floyd was arrested on Monday, now a memorial filled with flowers. In Washington, D.C., intense unrest broke out in Lafayette Park, right in front of the White House, when the police advanced to enforce the curfew. Officers fired tear gas into the crowds, and US Marshals personnel and DEA agents were deployed in addition to National Guard and Secret Service to assist the police. Police have come under intense scrutiny and criticism for their actions on Saturday night, accused of heavy-handed tactics, attacking and arresting protesters and members of the media. Demonstrators also protested outside the US Embassy in London, Berlin and Copenhagen as the movement spread abroad. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, whose district includes Minneapolis, said that residents were feeling terrorised. We're living in a country which has a 2-tier justice system, and people are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we need to really step back and say to ourselves, where do we actually go from here? And that can't just be getting justice for George Floyd. It needs to be bigger than that. Donald Trump has done little to calm the situation. He labelled the protesters anarchists and claimed without any evidence that political opponents were orchestrating the violence. The violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorising the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses and burning down buildings. Law and order, in capital letters, Trump tweeted on Sunday night. It has also emerged, according to a report in the New York Times, that the Secret Service had also been so unnerved by a protest outside the White House on Friday evening that they had taken Mr. Trump to a secure bunker. Now, I think, Effie, since we haven't spoken to each other for such a long time, I'll start with you this evening for your reaction to the story of the developing street protests across the United States. Effie, what do you make of these rapidly spreading violent unrest across the states.
Gordon, this isn't new. Sadly, in America, and obviously, racism is not an American phenomenon. It's sadly, it's all over the world. This is something that we see on a daily basis, be it a comment, be it a word, be it an action. But America in particular, because of how big it is, because of the size of it, and of the jurisprudence, the judicial system, and the way it is constructed and set up, it's particularly vulnerable to racism. And there is a big section of America that we don't know anything about. America is not New York, and it's not Los Angeles in the glitzy mansion that we see on television. America is comprised by about 2/3 of Americans, I believe, I may be wrong, do not have a passport or have not traveled outside and have not finished basic education. So you have an issue there where racism is embedded in their consciousness, and they get so passionate about issues of race and about blacks and Latinos that where it becomes impossible to penetrate. So what happened the other day, we have seen murders of black men, and sadly many black women before. The academic Kimberly Kershaw, who I have worked with remotely, she's an amazing woman, and I very highly recommend looking her up. She has been following this and been trying to analyze how this is a structural issue, and this is not just about a one-off incident. Let's not forget that Trump, also on top of all this, he's going absolutely crazy at the moment. He's got 41 million jobless on his hands that he doesn't know what to do about. Trump is used to a continual PR exercise. He's used to loving his own image. He's a narcissist. He's a vain man who has no understanding of American society. I was telling my dad the other day, and we're having a bit of a giggle. I said, if you asked Trump to point America on a map, I very much doubt whether he'd be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So not only does he have the huge unemployment, I'm just reading a report just now that says that 1/5 of Americans missed rent payments this month. So you can imagine what an explosive situation there could be potentially. Now, you have that, and you also have the coronavirus thing. And
it's
again,
a powder keg.
You've got very passionate engagement there with Americans. Some of them think that by praying to God, that's going to cure them of the coronavirus, and others trying to shield. So it's an explosive situation, but race and racism is something that we all have to tackle at some point. This is sadly just a symptom of it. It's happening every day.
Okay, listen, thank you very much for that analysis, Effie. Chris, if I could come to you next on this subject. I don't know about you, I was struck by the similarities between what's happening now and what happened in 1992 in LA when Rodney King was beaten to death by police officers and a video emerged. This is almost exactly the same kind of situation. It looks as if nothing has changed in the United States policing of African Americans since 1992.
Well, it's not just 1992. You go back, it seems, every decade there seems to be some sort of conflict between what we can describe as true white Americans, and it's not just black people, unfortunately. It's Hispanic, it's Mexican, it's Chinese. I mean, I've just found America, and I, like America, but I find it one of the most intolerant nations in the world. I mean, even if you pledge allegiance to the flag, as a black person born in America, you are deemed to have less rights than a white person who is born in America that pledges their allegiance to the flag. So, and it's not helpful as well when you've got a right-wing prime minister, president, putting out conversations like, he was telling his governors that they were all weak, and if they don't act upon this with, some fairly heavy-handed tactics, the likelihood is that it would spread like wildfire.
Well, it seems to.
You can't use language like that, and I don't think that we would have seen the level of violence that we are seeing now under the previous administrations of, Reagan, Carter, Bush.
Chris, can I ask you this? If this kind of event had happened here in the UK, do you think that the police in the United Kingdom would then change the way they train their officers to handle restraint techniques, or would they let it go as well? Are we any better than America?
The police, although they are linked to the government, they're not linked to the government as they are linked to the government in America. The British police have got a certain sort of like type of autonomy there, but with the same token, and we've seen it with the likes of people of the ilk of Tommy Robinson or thing, whatever his name is,
well, we still have people of colour dying in police custody here in Scotland as well. It's happened and across the United Kingdom. It seems to be a problem worldwide.
Last week we were talking about the unfortunate death of Sheikh Obayo, which happened in Scotland. So, I'm not trying to belittle the conversation that we're having, but what I'm saying is the fact that the police in America seem very heavy-handed as opposed to, the police in Britain.
Okay. Well, of course, we have had riots in the UK as well in the past, Chris. Nobody, and of course that was triggered, I believe, by the shooting of a black person back in those days as well. So this is not a new phenomenon, is it? It's been with us for decades. Anyway, Chris, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on to our next item this evening, which is part of the same story. And in this case, the SNP has demanded that the UK Foreign Secretary faces questions from MPs after he failed to condemn tweets from the US President Donald Trump that incited violence on the streets of America. The party's shadow Foreign Secretary called out Dominic Raab for his woeful failure to condemn Donald Trump's tweets during a broadcast round on both BBC's Andrew Marshall and the Sky News' Sophie Ridge programme on Sunday, including a tweet which stated, "Any difficulty and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts." The SNP Shadow Foreign Secretary Alan Smith MP said that the UK government's response to events in America over the weekend raises serious questions about its competence and moral compass. What can the Foreign Secretary comment on, if not on issues of foreign affairs? Now, Effie, if I could ask you first about this. Alan Smith is really sort of going for this, and I think rightly so in this case. Is this a case of the Foreign Office being too scared to speak out because they know they're going to need a trade deal from the Americans after Brexit?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it goes without saying they have no allies at the moment. London, Westminster have no allies at the moment, especially the Brexit, the Brexit coterie. They are literally relying on Trump and his group and his friends. I would say his gang. That's a personal opinion, obviously, to grant them something, which. Again, there is absolutely no guarantee that they will be granted, given that these things take years. They have to go through Congress, and by that time, Trump will be long gone. Indeed. So absolutely, and that is why the approach, as you said, is the way that it is. But also think about who you're dealing with. You're dealing with Raab and Gove and Johnson, people who are ideologically espoused to Donald Trump. Yeah. So it would be unlikely that you get any opposition to what he's doing. In fact, I think they're endorsing it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Effie. I'm just going to move to the next part, Chris, before I come back to you. And this is also related to the story, the way people are responding to what's happening in the United States. And Facebook employees critical of CEO Mark Zuckerberg's decision not to act on President Trump's inflammatory comments about US protests went public on Twitter, praising a rival social media firm for acting and rebuking their own employer. Many tech workers from companies including Facebook, Google, and Amazon have actively pursued issues of social justice in recent years, using their employers to take action, urging their employers to take action and to change policies. Even so, the weekend criticism marked a rare case of high-level employees publicly taking their chief executive to task, with at least 3 of the 7 critical posts coming from people who identified themselves as senior managers. Mark is wrong, and I will endeavour in the loudest possible way to change his mind, wrote Ryan Freitas, whose Twitter account identifies him as the Director of Product Design for Facebook's newsfeed. He added that he had mobilised 50-plus like-minded folks to lobby for internal change. Jason Toff, identified as a Director of Product Management, wrote, "I work at Facebook and I'm not proud of how we're showing up. The majority of co-workers I've spoken to feel the same way. We're making our voice heard." Facebook did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the employee dissent. On Friday, Twitter added a warning label to a tweet from Trump, which he had included the phrase, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." Twitter said the tweet violated its rules against glorifying violence, but was being left up as a public service exception. Nationwide unrest erupted after the death of the black man George Floyd in police custody in Minneapolis on Monday. Video footage showed a white officer kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes before he died. Facebook declined to take action on the same message, with Zuckerberg saying in a Facebook post on Friday that while he found the remarks deeply offensive, they did not violate company policy against incitements to violence, and people should know if the government was planning to deploy state force. But with some of Facebook's dissenting employees directly praising Twitter's response. Chris, I think this is a good one for you. Now, here we are with Zuckerberg's own senior management criticising him for not being tougher on Mr. Trump's tweet.
Well, I think that we've often said on this programme that social media is a necessary evil these days, and especially days of isolation, and it's often, as we are doing just now, it's often the only medium that we actually have, and I would encourage all activists to use their social media as a resource tool to search out your news items, and research them obviously before you post them up to see, if you've got, at least a good background of the information that is put up, because more often than not, things that look okay on face value, excuse me, once you actually go and do a bit of digging. And this applies equally to Twitter, that applies to YouTube. Sometimes news articles are not quite what they seem. So, and I think it's laudable that certain people within these companies wish to draw back from some of the more, shall we say, dubious practices of Facebook and Twitter, because they have had their faux pas in the past, and I think with such a sensitive issue, and not just the Floyd issue, but also with COVID-19, you have to be accurate in what you are talking about, and obviously what you're sharing as well.
Well, Chris, I'm going to leave this particular subject for the moment and move on to our next story this evening. And there seems to have been a flurry of polls recently, Chris, but the next story is about just one of them. The SNP has said that Boris Johnson needs to take responsibility for the Dominic Cummings scandal and remove his senior advisor from post after a new poll revealed that people increasingly view the Tories as incompetent and out of touch. The YouGov poll published in the Times today reveals a growing number of people now view the Tories as incompetent, 43%, that's up 16 points. Out of touch was 48%, up 11 points, and untrustworthy, 47%, up 11 points. And when asked about whether they were serving their own interests, 48%, which is an increase of 12 percentage points. When asked if they thought they were weak, 32%, and that was an increase of 18%. And when asked if they cared only about a select few, 53% of people agreed. That's plus 7%. It follows a poll from Opinium published in The Observer yesterday, which found Boris Johnson's net approval rating is now in the negative at -5. That's minus 11 percentage points from the previous level. Whilst 2/3, 66%, think that Boris Johnson should sack Mr Cummings, and 2 in 5, 43%, say that they have lost respect for the Tory government over its support for Mr Cummings. The SNP has today pressed for a Cabinet Office inquiry into the Dominic Cummings scandal and Downing Street cover-up. Over the weekend, a public petition reached over 1 million signatures, with MPs continuing to receive large amounts of correspondence from constituents. And 2 of England's Deputy Chief Medical Officers spoke out on the issue. The SNP Westminster Deputy Leader, Kirsty Blackman MP, said, "It's now clear that the Dominic Cummings scandal has done serious damage to public confidence in the Tory government and its response to the coronavirus. Boris Johnson must finally accept his responsibilities, remove Mr Cummings from his post and repair the harm that he has done to public health." Now, I'm hoping that we have Effie. Well, I'm sorry, but we're having trouble getting Effie back. She seems to have come off Skype. But I'll come to you, Chris, on this particular story. So we have several polls now showing that the voters are beginning to lose faith in Mr Johnson in the rest of the UK, and his popularity among the voting age people in the UK is going into the minus now.
Just beginning?
Well, this is the numbers I have in front of me, Chris, so it could have been going minus before that.
I say just beginning because it's been clear from the start, to me anyway, that Boris is incompetent. He is incapable of leadership, and he is also incapable to operate that government without the aid of his puppet master, and quite clearly, Cummings has said that he's not going anywhere within the next 6 months, and he's determined to be a part of that government until such times as Brexit is done, and that is signed, sealed, and delivered. And he actually, to me, he draws popularity from quite a number of predominant Brexiteers, the likes of Gove and Mogg. They don't want to see him gone either, because they know that if Cummings isn't there, Boris could actually cave in.
You believe that
actually look to defer Brexit.
So what? Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. You appear to be saying that you believe that Boris Johnson can't stand, the amount of work he has to do as PM without this key advisor. He would be unable to continue.
Absolutely. Boris has been proven before to be a lazy oaf. It was a lazy oaf when he worked for the newspapers. It was a lazy oaf when he worked as the mayor of London. He seems to need to have an entourage in order to operate.
He was famously fired by the newspaper that employed him as well, wasn't he?
Yep. And it was down to his woeful aptitude to actually write anything coherent. There was allegations that he was plagiarising other people's work and stuff like that. and I think he is winging it.
Yeah.
This virus has caused him real pain because just because of his ineptitude more than anything. You look at the opinion polls, and you've got Nicola Sturgeon sitting on 84%. I actually took myself out yesterday on a bus journey of 5 miles down to Shawlands to see my cousin, and I met a friend of mine, chatting away to him, a unionist, and he was full of praise of Nicola, and I have never seen that in the 6 years that I've known him.
Can I ask
absolutely full of praise of Nicola.
Chris, if you could forgive me interrupting, another question occurred to me, and that was that Dominic Cummings' antics over the previous 8 weeks. 8 weeks ago, this happened when he drove to the north of England. Do you think that this episode where Mr. Cummings claims that he went for a 35-mile drive or whatever it was to test his eyesight, do you think that people are just looking at that and saying, what a load of rubbish that is? If he can go out and have fun doing whatever he wants in the middle of the crisis, then why shouldn't we?
Well, yes, you know, there is an element of that. And also I've seen over the weekend that there's been an emergence of several pictures allegedly showing Cummings walking about in the town centre of the place that he was at. And they've been in several quality journals, such as the New Statesman and stuff like that. So when people see that he has very little social conscience, basically he views that because he's in such a powerful position that he's got carte blanche to do what he wants to do, and damn everyone else. He'll just ride out the consequences. Then it shows a very glib take on the attitude of the government at this moment in time. Well, it's not one of professionalism in any such way, shape or form.
Okay, listen, Chris, I'll need to stop you there. We have Effie back. We had re-established contact with Effie. Effie, I don't know how much of the story you've managed to pick up since you reconnected with us, but we're talking about Dominic Cummings.
Literally, I've been just praying to be able to get back onto Wi-Fi, so it's just, I've not. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're talking about Mr. Cummings, and we know that his antics 8 weeks ago and the way that they came out in the media seems to have provoked a reaction amongst people who are taking this as an example of how they should behave. That it's okay for them to go motoring off to see relatives just because the government's doing it.
Absolutely, and I will say one thing. While I'm fortunate enough to be given this platform tonight by yourselves, don't be like Cummings. Please stay home. Stay home. Shield if you must. Don't go out, and don't worry about Cummings. So that's the general message. But I completely understand the temptation, and also I completely understand the anger, because you're not. This isn't even about double standards. This goes beyond. This goes right into. You're talking about. This is disrespect, and also it demonstrates an attitude of an archaic attitude of. As we've been discussing last week in social media and on the news about one rule for the aristocracy, and I know it's a very old phrase, but actually this is the position that Mr. Cummings himself takes. I don't know if the viewers or yourselves have had the opportunity to watch his father-in-law discuss eugenics and the importance of being noble and descending from grand families. He was talking absolute rubbish. I can tell you, as a doctoral researcher at Glasgow University under the great Alison Phipps, there is absolutely nothing in that. So the idea that this man belongs to that ideology tells you what you need to know about him. The other thing that we need to discuss about Cummings is his position, which he has never lied about. Going back to 2013, an article was published in The Guardian about Cummings on a report that he had compiled for Gove at the time. He was working under Gove at the Ministry of Education, and he basically, I think it was about 250 pages, filled with nonsense about how we must not invest in lower class minds because genes inform who you are.
Yeah.
Now, this is Cummings, and this isn't news. And you know, I was I was not even shocked when this happened. And to be honest with you, again, this is a personal opinion. I do not know whether Cummings or his wife were ill or not. I believe nothing that comes out of their mouths. But at the end of the day, I have no doubt that they just come and go as they please. The rules are for us; they're not for Cummings.
Okay, thank you, Effie. We're going to move on a little bit. More of the story now is emerging, and the SNP has pressed for a Cabinet Office inquiry into the Dominic Cummings scandal, warning the senior Tory advisor must be completely unaccountable. I beg your pardon, must not be completely unaccountable for his rule breaking. In a letter to the Cabinet Secretary ahead of the Parliament returning on Tuesday, Ian Blackford MP has said that the confirmation by Durham Police that there was a breach of the regulations, added to what Mr Cummings already admitted on wider breaches of the UK government guidance, meant that there was a clear need for an inquiry. Commenting, the SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, said Dominic Cummings must not be left completely unaccountable for his actions. No matter how exceptional he thinks he is, there cannot be one rule for Tory advisers and another for everyone else. There's a very real sense of indignation that Boris Johnson has refused to take his responsibilities as Prime Minister seriously and has failed to remove Mr Cummings from post, severely undermining trust in the UK government and its public health guidance. Over 1 million people have signed the petition, and MPs are still being flooded with messages from our constituents who are flabbergasted that this senior Tory advisor is acting with impunity and getting away with it. Very briefly, Chris, because this story has flowed on throughout the early part of the programme, a brief comment about this. Is Dominic Cummings above the law? Can he escape some form of justice or scrutiny, do you think? Is he just going to bluff it out?
Very quickly, Gordon, no, he's not above the law, but yes, this he will get away with it.
Okay.
That is it in a nutshell. And you know, there is nothing, and I mean this with the greatest respect for Ian Blackford and the Westminster Group. That there is no amount of calling for an inquiry to Cummings' behaviour or Boris Johnson's behaviour, because without the backup of UK Labour, which Keir Starmer seems to be, he seems to be warming his backside on the green benches.
Well, he certainly has been quite quiet.
Sorry?
Certainly Mr Starmer has been fairly quiet. Either that or the media is not giving him a platform.
Yeah. But as I say, and again, I mean this with the greatest respect to Ian, he can kick, shout and stamp his feet for as long as he likes.
But it's not going to do any good.
Without Labour to back up the calls for an independent inquiry, it won't go anywhere, and you will get the situation where the population in the UK will see Cummings doing what he wants to do and getting away with it. Okay, and that's the harsh reality of it, and that's why I confidently say that he will be in his post for the next 6 months.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris. Effie, very briefly, if you don't mind, your comments on this idea that there should be an inquiry into Mr Cummings. Do you think it's a flyer? Do you think it's a realistic prospect? Absolutely
not. Mr Cummings is above Mr Johnson. Boris Johnson is lazy by nature. He has not done a day's work in his life. This is Cummings designing designing the whole coronavirus thing on the basis of behavioral science, and who Cummings himself is actually quite a dim person. So the connection between them is so deeply corrupted and bizarre that no one's touching Cummings. Not right now. Not under the Conservative government.
So this seems like a sort of symbiosis where Dominic Cummings has taken over the vacated brain of Boris Johnson and is steering him around.
a polite way of saying it. Symbiosis is a brilliant word, yeah.
Well, listen, we have to move on.
Another way of saying than just the fact that the lunatics have taken over the asylum.
Okay, well, let's leave it there, Chris. I've got to move on now. The SNP again today has said that Tory plans for a conga line parliament are unacceptable, unworkable and must be abandoned after the UK government published a motion to shut down vital participation in Westminster despite the coronavirus pandemic. Tommy Shepherd MP called for Boris Johnson to scrap his botched plans and retain virtual participation after Tory proposals for a socially distanced voting line, which could extend over 1 kilometre, were widely mocked. The Tory government's plans came despite cross-party consensus between the SNP, Labour, Lib Dem, Plaid Cymru, SDLP, the Greens, Alliance Party and some Tory MPs that remote participation must continue. On Saturday, a report from the Procedure Committee recommended virtual participation remains for as long as the pandemic continues. The Tory plans have been widely criticised. The Electoral Reform Society said, if this goes ahead, it is beyond a farce. It is unacceptable when there is currently a safe, secure and speedy option for voting available, remote digital voting. MPs already used it and it works. The Public and Commercial Services Union, which represents security, catering and support staff in Parliament, said the part virtual system had worked well with General Secretary Mark Serwotka, saying that it was strange why the government was in such a rush to change course when a second COVID spike is such a strong possibility. Now, I will come to you first this time, Effie. This, when I heard about it, struck me as utterly ridiculous. But what do you think is the motivation behind the Tory party attempting to force MPs into a voting conga line? Seems utterly preposterous.
It's disenfranchisement. That's what it is. They want to take the right to vote away from certain groups, and we know who these groups are. They have a very large majority, which was obtained in the different ways that we've discussed, and they will use that for as long as they can. It's a fantastic way of disenfranchising large groups of the opposition benches, and also let's not forget the physicality of the Boris Johnson's baying mob being there to do the work that he himself cannot and won't do. If you look at Boris, if you try and watch him speak and try and answer questions, he never does. He doesn't do any work. The other day, he admitted to not having read one scientific paper on the coronavirus, which is, I don't even know if this actually amounts to an abdication of duty at this time, given the amount of deaths that we're talking about, but he has no problem admitting. So he needs people there to be shouting and tapping their feet and voicing their insults and doing the work that he himself won't do. So a very brief answer to your question is just disenfranchisement, taking a right away and doing away with the opposition without having to worry about them.
Okay, thank you, Effie. Chris, briefly from you, your reaction to this piece of very bizarre voting system being devised by the Tories. What do you think?
Well, again, I think I can qualify what I said, about 5 minutes ago about the lunatics taking over the asylum. You have people, not necessarily in our party, but you have people in UK Labour, likes of the Chris Bryant, who said that the very idea of forming a queue in such a conga line fashion, it's like waiting for the Oblivion ride at Alton Towers. It's absolute madness. It's ludicrous.
Do you agree with Chris? Do you agree with Effie that this is a sort of rather bizarre attempt at gerrymandering the voting system?
Well, of course it is, and it's and quite clearly it's undemocratic, and it's discriminatory against the Scottish MPs, the Green MPs, and the Lib Dems. And basically, what the Tory party want to do is that they want to push us to one side. And I include the Lib Dems and the Greens and even the DUP in that, and they just want to go head to head with Labour, and such as the arrogance of the fact that they have got an 80-odd majority that again gives them carte blanche to do what they want, and as long as you have, unfortunately, comedic characters like Jacob Rees-Mogg going back to the 1300s, do you know what I mean? Where he wants, everybody to form a line and be entertained by court jesters and stuff like that, whilst you're waiting, in order to doff your cap and tuck your furlock, then, we are always going to have this anarchic situation at Westminster.
Okay, well, listen, thank you, Chris. I'm going to just briefly change tack now for our next story. And it is now 1 month officially until the Brexit extension deadline. With just 1 month to go until the Brexit extension deadline, the SNP has urged the UK government to heed the growing chorus of calls for a common sense approach and to extend the transition period without delay. As the fourth and final round of talks gets underway this week, the London Mayor added his voice to calls from opposition parties and businesses for an extension to protect the economy and thousands of jobs, urging the Tory government to put political ideology aside. After the EU's chief Brexit negotiator wrote to Westminster leaders of the SNP, the Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru, the SDLP, the Green Party, and the Alliance Party, confirming that the bloc remains open to extension, Michel Barnier issued a stark warning that the UK has been taking a step back, 2 steps back, 3 steps back from the original from the original commitments, and risked a no-deal Brexit. In commenting, the SNP's shadow Brexit spokesperson, Dr. Philippa Whitford, said, "With just 1 month to go until the Brexit extension deadline, it is vital that the UK government heeds the growing chorus of calls for a common sense approach that extends the transition period and to protect jobs and the economy. The coronavirus pandemic has already put businesses under unprecedented financial pressure, and crashing out of the EU at the end of this year with a bad deal or a catastrophic no deal would deliver a devastating economic body blow from which many firms would struggle to recover." Now, I'd like to come to you first, Effie, on this. My impression, just reading this myself, is that the Prime Minister appears to be putting his dislike of Europeans before the safety, security and jobs of UK and Scottish citizens. Would you agree, Effie? That he's putting his ideology first?
I would completely agree. And this is, again, we should not be surprised. Johnson has never made a secret of this from the late 80s, when he was, I think, dismissed by, was it the Telegraph, or I believe it was the Times, for lying
yes, that's true.
On a story about Europe. Right through through the 90s and the last 20 years, he hasn't changed. He has a problem. His problem is called Anglo-Atlanticist exceptionalism. He finds himself, it's a psychopathology. He thinks he's great. And if you read, I was laughing the other day because I just someone was tweeting, and I'm sure a lot of our audience would be familiar with this tonight. It was a report from one of his teachers at Eton, and it was literally within about 3 lines about how lazy and incompetent that man is, even at the age of 14 or 15 when that letter was compiled. Now, he doesn't he's the way that Johnson was positioned in the position that he's in as Prime Minister, and he was promoted by Murdoch and by all the people who are part of this ridiculousness of Brexit, is that he was going to pursue a no-deal Brexit. Every other possibility that was put forward has been proven to be a lie. When Gove was going out there saying he was going to be part of the single market or all the other people, none of this is true. They just want out. So yeah, he is pursuing a no-deal Brexit. If this happens, and God forbid it does, in the present time, it will be absolutely catastrophic. And I don't mean that in a melodramatic sense. Medicines, food. The other day, Gove admitted to increased food prices. And we're talking about January here. We're not talking about 10 years down the line. Yeah. I'm not quite sure who is in a position right now to afford higher food prices, but we're trapped. So yeah, my answer would be, in brief, that's what he's after. That's what he wants. And we'll see what happens to him once he's delivered that. Are they going to get Gove to play prime minister or whatever? But he is hurtling towards this catastrophe, 1,000 miles an hour. Let's see what happens.
Okay, Effie, thank you. Chris, very briefly from you, is this Boris Johnson, is he just in thrall to the United States? Can he do nothing without having to consider the United States first?
Well, no, Boris has put all his eggs into the one basket by basically not willing to engage with the EU, even although the discussions are ongoing. I firmly believe, and I've always been of the belief that Michael Gove has used COVID as a way of running down the clock so that we can come up to the end of the month and past that date where we could ask the EU for a 2-year extension. Yeah. They want to get us over that line so that we can miss that chance, and then Gove can basically coast on into the 31st of December and achieve that no Brexit that they famously said. That no deal Brexit that they famously said that they were not pursuing. Okay. And this is all because, and we have seen it time and time again. The stories are well documented. You have stories linking Dominic Raab to the American medical supply chain. Yep. The fact that medicines are going to be vastly. The price of American medicines are going to be vastly inflated for our NHS.
They would be part of the deal, we've heard, Chris. Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need to move on, I'm afraid. And the next story, we are now going to Sweden for our next... I beg your pardon, we're not going to a Swedish story. Commenting on the UK government plans to cap English student numbers at Scottish universities and some colleges offering higher education, the Higher Education Minister Richard Lochhead said, in the face of huge uncertainty, Scottish universities and colleges are working to continue to deliver world-class and safe learning and teaching. So the UK government's plan to restrict the number of English students that can come to Scotland, a plan which neither the Scottish Government nor Universities Scotland have agreed to, is deeply disappointing. Administrations in Wales and Northern Ireland have also objected. It is completely unnecessary and could add further damage to the sector, given that around 10% of the current enrolments are from England. The UK government should be working with the devolved administrations to support higher education at a time of crisis and not imposing, without agreement, targets and sanctions which are aimed at stabilising the English market and are not relevant to Scotland. Effie, this is a very incendiary story, I think, to disadvantage Scottish universities deliberately in this way. Seems an outrageous thing for the British government to be doing, especially when they consider that they're always talking about us as being, in a precious union. That just seems to have gone out of the window here.
Well, it is precious when it comes to, taking things from the union. But when it comes to putting things back in or working within the union, then, we know the deal. Now, I can only speak as, someone who's been part of Glasgow University for a number of years, and both in terms of impact and in my doctoral research. Our universities, Scottish universities, are amongst the best in the world. Glasgow, I'm very obviously familiar with the systems. The moment coronavirus became a reality, we were literally, systems were set up within about a week. It's a safe environment to be in. Academically, it is literally the elite, and I will use that word because it's not a bad word. That means the absolute creme de la creme of internationally acknowledged and renowned knowledge. The idea that you're going to put this cap on, for me, signals another insult to the settlement of devolution. The whole idea of devolution and everything that goes with it, again, is attacked. And we know why that is. And let us not forget that this is a very, very challenging time for universities. And we know that both in terms of Edinburgh University, where I've had discussions, people are very anxious. So to be imposing this at this time is deliberate, it's insulting, and it's not going to do any good to English students. They are deliberately harming the potential of English students by doing this.
Okay.
But again, the implications are wide, and we must really sit and think about that.
Okay, thank you, Effie. Chris, I'll bring you in on our next story, if that's all right. And our next story is about the public being told to stay at home. Now, the public are reminded to stay local for exercise and recreation. The public are being urged to stay local when they leave home for exercise or recreation following a rise in traffic numbers over the weekend. The early statistics from Transport Scotland show a significant rise in parts of Scotland. Traffic levels across Scotland on Saturday were 60% up on the previous Saturday. Traffic levels across Scotland on Sunday were 70% up on the previous Sunday. And on the A82 at Loch Lomond on Saturday, the increase in traffic was over 200% higher than the previous Saturday. Transport Scotland will give further details on travel data as part of their regular update later this week. The Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure and Connectivity, Michael Matheson, said, "We've only been able to ease some of the lockdown measures as the public have followed guidance closely up to this point. So I would urge people to continue to play their part. We have seen a significant rise in traffic this past weekend. At Loch Lomond, traffic levels were more than 3 times higher than the previous Saturday, and in the middle of the afternoon, over 4 times higher. On our rail network, Balloch Station saw an increase in passenger numbers. These volumes go beyond what would be expected to be generated by local residents, nor are they in keeping with people staying within the 5-mile radius of home, or by people travelling a reasonable distance to meet loved ones. While you can leave the house for exercise and recreation, the guidance says that you should not be going any further than 5 miles from home and to avoid tourist destinations and beauty spots. You should also maintain physical distancing when you go out and wear face coverings on public transport. I realise that this is difficult for everyone, particularly with the weather being so good, but we can only take steps towards a less restricted lifestyle and then consider taking further steps to ease lockdown measures if people continue to follow the guidance." Chris, I wanted to bring you in on this story because I know that Nicola Sturgeon reacted quite strongly to the sudden increase of crowds of people arriving in beauty spots over the past few days.
Well, she said as early as Thursday of last week that she was fearful of the upcoming weekend, taking into account the weather forecast. And she was proved right. We've seen really some bizarre scenes in Kelvin Grove Park and at Luss, and as you quite rightly say, down at the main village of Balloch and stuff like that, where the public traffic has increased by 200% in the space of 12 hours. And so and it's also it's I use the word criminal because it is criminal. It's criminal to think that people have got so little thought for themselves or their own families, their own communities that they come from, and the communities that they are going to actually visit. And it's madness on a grand scale that, you know, as I said, the First Minister was fearful. Even Jason Leach said that he was fearful about people, you know, just taking that, you know, 5% off of the gas.
Yeah, can I ask you?
And, you know, just...
Chris, can I ask you a little bit about Nicola's response? I'd heard some word that she may be planning to empower the police a little bit more if people are continue to break the lockdown, well, continue to break the new rules.
Well, she has said countless times that she won't be afraid to roll back, and basically take away the concessions that she's actually made in stage one. So people need to be aware that the limited amount of mobility that the First Minister has granted Scotland can be easily taken away, and we can go back into immediate lockdown. Okay. And that is nobody's fault, but these nutters, and I can only say nutters, it's my personal opinion, is the fact that these nutters, I'm looking at a picture just now of Kelvin Grove Park, and I honestly, I am weeping, because I thought that it was only, you know, these scenes were only replicated down in London and down in the southeast of England, and it seems to be, Chris, it's like lemmings.
Chris, sorry, I'd like to bring Effie into this conversation as well. Effie, Chris saying there that he feels that people are almost copying what's going on in London. How much do you think that people are confused by the mixed messages? Because we have two governments, one which speaks mostly for England, I guess now, in this particular instance at least, and our own government in Scotland. And the media as well seems to be mixing the messages. How easy is it for people to actually decipher what they're supposed to do?
Well, you know, the way that the media react to this a lot of the time is a political, they actually weaponize it in a way. So we've seen when, for example, the First Minister or members of her cabinet will come forward and ask people or request people to stay home, that there will always be articles peppered all over the press, or even directly asking her, are you trying to antagonize London? Now, this, when you're talking about people's lives, this is actually beyond tragic. Yes. This should not be happening. And this is the reason why some people will read what they want into these messages. They will, as you say, on the one hand, they are seeing people, Brighton Beach, Dorset, be it whatever, you know, and there's literally hundreds, thousands of people there, and people will think, okay, well, this is something that I too can try. The sun's shining, let's do this. Also, as we know, human nature is sometimes that we don't want to think about things that, you know, are negative or that we don't like. Coronavirus, we do have, there's been a reduction in the cases and the deaths, but this is a very, very fragile reality that we're living at the moment. The virus is not under control, and it's been slightly suppressed, but we're not at that stage yet. The media are absolutely not helping, but whoever's listening to us right now, please don't worry about that. Don't listen to the media. Listen to yourselves and think about your families. Yeah. I completely agree with you.
Okay, Effie, listen, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our final story this evening, a little bit more upbeat, I hope. And May 2020 has turned out to be the sunniest calendar month on record. It has been the sunniest spring on record for the UK and the driest May on record in England. 626 hours of bright sunshine were recorded in spring of 2020 for the UK and have exceeded the previous high, 555 hours, set in 1948 by over 70 hours. Spring of 2020 also exceeds the sunshine amount for the most summer seasons, with only 3 summers being sunnier, 1976, 1995 and 1989. All UK countries have recorded their sunniest spring on record in a series stretching back to 1929. So clearly, if this is global warming that we are experiencing and the weather is changing rapidly, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's nice that it's warm at the moment, but let's hope we don't have any more of those extremely wet winters that we just saw all the way up to the end of February. Now it's coming up to the end of the show, and it's the time when I traditionally make my plea for you to help us make more programmes. So if you enjoy Broadcasting Scotland's output and you would like us to make more programmes, you can help by becoming a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland by simply following the directions on your screen now. Go to www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register and follow the prompts. That is it from the studio here at Cowcaddens this evening. I'll be back on Thursday with another show. In the meantime, I'd like to thank my guests, Effie and Chris. And from the studio, that's it. A good night to you all.